Hey y'all, I am Carolina Tony. Again, I come to you from the middle of nowhere, Utah. And we are here where an engineered feat happened in the 19th century that was amazing. The Transcontinental Railroad. We are at a site where the East Coast met the West Coast and a golden spot was driven in the ground on a railroad track.
On the weathered hillside, there are footprints of fierce rivals straining for the finish line in the greatest race of the 19th century. The stakes were high. Each mile of track laid down meant enormous land grants and hefty federal subsidies. Blasting up from California came the Central Pacific Railroad, led by four eminent Sacramento businessmen with 10,000 Chinese laborers. Eastern money and rough immigrant track gangs pushed the Union Pacific Railroad out from Omaha, barreling across the plains and through the Rockies. Both competitors had one last obstacle: the ascent of the Promontory Mountains, the steepest grade east of the Sierra Nevada. In the middle of this rough grade was an unfavorable 500-foot wide Spring Creek ravine. By the spring of 1869, both railroads hurtled over this ravine, each making a leap in its own way. So right across here was a wooden trestle. In fact, here is an actual picture of it. The Union Pacific men were a month behind schedule when they hastily constructed this wooden trestle. Only a few trains rolled over the shaky 400-foot long frame, since all traffic moved over to the big field after a few months. So you can see over that direction, over this direction is where the trestle was. They eventually decided that they would fill it in. After the trestle, that they went across a little ravine and a creek. They get to hills across the prairie. They want to keep things as smooth as possible. This here is called the last cut. You see where they cut down through this hill.
Here, but they right there.
That is a replica of the spot.
That's a replica. And then in addition to that, they had 4 precious metal spikes. They had a second gold one. So California had 2 golden spikes. Nevada had a silver, and then the territory of Arizona had a gold and silver clad, meaning plated, iron spike.
What's got on there about joining the
the names of railroad officials are on there, and then there's an inscription that reads, "May God continue the unity of our country as this railroad unites the 2 great oceans of the world."
There we go.
6 million spikes and 6 years' work lay behind them. Now only one section of rails was left undone, the honor of ceremonial finishing the Pacific Railroad with a spike maul, hot wired to telegraph line, fell to the 2 railroad barons who had spearheaded the road building Stamford and Durant. Speeches were given, and in a lengthy prayer, Governor at Stamford stepped up, took the hammer, swung, and missed. Then Dr. Durant took his turn and also missed the spike. With each spring of Mauls, a crowd of working men broke into spontaneous applause. Not only did the Railroad Act of 1862 lay out a grand plan of connecting the continent by rail, but the legislation called for a communication transformation as well. A telegraph line was to be strung along the transcontinental route, ushering in an era of instant communication from coast to coast. For 4 years, Americans closely followed the progress of the Pacific Railroad in newspapers, anxious to see it completed. By May of 1869, intense attention was focused on this desolate corner of northern Utah. The entire country was eager for the word that the last spike had been driven. Today, there's machinery that makes railroad ties, but back then, everything was hand cut. The Central Pacific built sawmills in heavily timbered Sierra Nevada mountains and produced identical finished ties, while the Union Pacific rough-hewn ties were delivered from tie cutting camps in the mountains, as well as felling trees along riverbanks and wherever they could be found along the route. This section of rail here is original to the Transcontinental Railroad. It was called a pairhead, and here's a diagram of what a pairhead rail looks like. To the Irish who toiled on the Transcontinental Railroad, uniting our nation. Here is a picture of the Southern Pacific Monument, and here it is now. In 1965, the National Park Service assumed ownership of this aging monument, which had been damaged by years of weathering and vandalism. The interior also had been severely damaged by groundwater and wicked up to the monument through its being buried in the base. Early restoration attempts unintentionally contributed to the damage by using materials that did not allow for evaporation of water trapped inside the monument. It has been restored and moved to this present space. Well, that is going to do it for our trip to the Golden Spike National Historical Park here in Utah.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
And really, this is the middle of nowhere. And this is where the two coasts came together. The East Coast met the West Coast, and that famous Golden Spike was driven in the railroad tie. Right here in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of Utah.
It was nice coming here. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. And also, don't forget to click that bell so you'll be notified every time we put a video out, which is always on Mondays and Fridays and sometimes in between. But for now,
y'all have a good day.
Y'all have a good day here.